Hello, namaste. My name is Suzanne. In today's Suzanne Talks to, I have Anish. I'm very excited. This is another person, this time not from Twitter, this time from Instagram. I'm very excited to have you here, Anish. And besides being an architect, you have a very interesting Instagram handle as well. And maybe you can just tell our audience or my audience a little bit about it and about yourself.
Sure. Namaste, ma'am. And I'm really honored to be in your show. I really am inspired by your work, the kind of ideology and the ideas and the thoughts you get on the table through your show and your audience. It's really an honor for me to address to your audience today. So, I'm an architect. Yeah. And namaste to everyone over here who are watching the show. So, I'm an architect and an architectural designer. I do architectural journalism also. That means where I basically document buildings, heritage structures, and then write articles about it, probably click a loads of photos and then analyze what the architects of the past worked on and what quite they were thinking. Sometimes it also goes into integrating philosophy into architecture. There is a lot of role of history. At least that's what I bring from my side because I'm a big history uh, lover, basically. So history is something which I cannot really separate from architecture ever. That's the shortest intro I can give.
I actually Googled that history and architecture, and you're not the only one who is propagating this. You're not the only one who thinks like that. And it makes a lot of sense that if you see your culture is connected to your architecture is connected to your culture. Like I had sent you this video of one of our trips, and we were in a castle, and I learned so much about in Germany about the culture there. And the same goes here. If you go to Rajasthan and you
Right.
see the culture and the architecture, how it is combined, and then you go to south, you have the same kind of thing. And especially temples, I find temples are a sure sign of how architecture and culture and the way of living was all combined in a very beautiful way.
Right. So basically, in our civilization, or I'll say globally itself, temples served a purpose of educating the people. And a lot of people don't know that the concept of temple, at least in the West and in the middle world, might have origin from Greece than actually
Hmm.
Bharat. Because even as per some schools of thoughts, uh, in Dwapar Yuga, which is a yoga before this, there were not many of the temples or the concept of going to temple much. This is still disputed. I won't really lay claims anywhere over here. But in the Vedic age, what we know is that we had the fire worshipping and the yagnas. So the concept of temple could as well be Greek also, along with it being very much a Bharatiya thing.
I feel like many a times, even at the times when things got discovered and there was no communication between countries, coincidental, the same things were discovered at the same kind of time, or the same kind of writing was happening in
Right.
many cultures. You have the same kind of poetry happening, you have the same kind of culture happening. So that brings this idea of a global consciousness, that we are not aware of, but it's definitely something that is there and that we're tapping into. Because otherwise, I wouldn't understand how these things are happening. Now we go online, we can see everything, but even that is not so uh, old. We have been only doing this since the what 90, not even mid 90s, end 90s. I
Right.
mean, Google. The habit of using Google every day has just come now. So
Right. So basically, when the Greeks and Indians interacted for the very first time, it was around in the region of Afghanistan, the present day Afghanistan. There were a lot of similarities which the ancient Vedic people and the Greeks had. Whereas even they went to the temples, and then there was generally the statue or the idol of Zeus in center of the temple, and then we had our own deities in our own temple. But the concept was very similar, and which we can find not just in Greek world, but we can find it in Mesopotamia. We can find it in even pre-Zoroastrian Iran, that is the Avestan Persia, which a lot of people don't know, because generally what everybody talk about is that there was Zoroastrianism before, but there was something even before Zoroastrianism, which was more polytheistic in nature. And then we had Samaria, then we had Assyria, which is the modern day Syria, and the world of Kemet itself, which is now popularly known as Egypt, because which comes from the word called Egyptos. Basically, it was a Greek word for the nation of Kemet itself, or Kem in very short. So we see that the concept of architecture in temple has evolved quite syncretically, and we quite notice that faith and culture and traditions play a very strong role into building the physical structures.
And you said it was also for education. Temples were also used for education. That half of it was used as school, or how do I understand that?
So basically, at least what I can talk about ancient Indian temples is that it served as a school for the people. There was generally a gurukul attached to it, where a guru, which was the priest itself of the temple, would teach to every student, be it girl or a boy, from any varn, from any background. The temple doors were open for everyone to receive education in general, and this is why we see there were a lot of depictions on the wall from Ramayana and Mahabharata. It was basically their own way of conveying the stories, like how we have TV serials, like we have B.R. Chopra's and Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana and Mahabharata. Back then, they had the sculptures to convey those stories, and that's where architecture plays a crucial role in educating and teaching the stories of the past to the children.
Or even all about like society and how to treat each other. I think this is also going in that kind of a depiction in temples itself. So
Absolutely,
would you
ma'am.
say
Yeah.
nowadays the newer temples, are they adhering to the rules that should be there? What is your take on newer temples that are being built now, or are we copying, not copying, but are we being inspired from the older ones and we're just taking that kind of a design and putting it now, or are we incorporating something from the now, from our era?
So basically, when it comes to Hindu temple architecture itself, we have two major temple architecture styles. One is the
Hmm.
Nagar style. The second one is the Dravida style or Dravidian style. The Dravida style of architecture is more prevalent in South India, while the Nagar architecture is more prevalent in the North India. Now, these two architectural styles are very traditionalist in nature. That means that it follows agamas, which are the written laws, basically, that how sculptures should be like and how iconography of certain deities should exactly be like. If you do not really follow it, then it's considered to be sort of blasphemous in a way. I mean, it's quite inaccurate.
Hmm.
And while for the architecture, we generally follow Vastu Shastra. So any temple which doesn't follow Vastu Shastra and isn't based on the priest's understanding of geomagnetic waves and electromagnetic waves which Earth has, and Earth has certain nodal points. Now, I'm not an expert in this exactly because it is a very ancient knowledge, but generally we used to see architecture not just from the lens of space and physical form, but there was also a lot of energy involved into this. And only on the basis of all these factors, if a temple is built, that temple is considered to be a very functional sort of a tool in a way.
So
So,
look-wise, these two architectural types, look-wise, how are they different? Is there a specific style that you can, like, you look at it and you know this is Dravidian, or how do I understand that?
right. So, generally, there's an emphasized gopurams in South Indian temples. That's the Dravida architecture. I think it will be much easier for people to understand with a diagram than actually me just putting down the names over
Okay,
here.
I just wanted to know if there's one specific thing that you say like that, like it's round, or it is like it's having certain kind of a structural landmarks, like if I see a temple that is in Vietnam, or if I see a temple in Thailand, I can make out a difference. Yeah, or if I see a
Absolutely.
temple here. And that's why I wanted to know, is there like a distinct thing that you say, okay, this is definitely north and this is definitely south style?
Uh, yeah, so I think I'll better quote examples over here. Like, for example, if one notices Brihadeshwar temple, and
Mm-hmm.
then
Yes, that.
that person, Brihadeshwar temple in Tanjavur in Tamil Nadu, which was
Okay.
built by the Cholan kings, and
Okay.
then one compares it with, let's say, the temple in Mount Abu, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Ranakpur one near Mount Abu in Rajasthan,
Mm-hmm.
or the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Akshardham Mandir in New Delhi itself, because it's
Mm-hmm.
the example of a modern architecture, which is very much based on the Nagar style. So what we see a major difference is that the North Indian temples tend to be a bit more lofty, if I have to
Aha.
put it down in very simple words. While the
Okay.
South Indian temples might not exactly be lofty, again, then there are a lot of variations within South Indian temples. So I cannot really generalize. Like in Karnataka, we have Hoysaleshwar style of architecture, which was built by the Hoysala Empire somewhere back in
Mm-hmm.
13th and 12th century, 14th century, 12th to 14th century.
Mm-hmm.
And they do not really have those lofty structures, at least over here. But again, then there's a lot of debate whether it was there or it was demolished by the invaders. And we have very less examples from North India currently because of the 1000 years old history. But with limited examples, we can find out from the very structure itself that the temples in North India tend to be slightly a bit more basic in terms of plan, while
Mm-hmm.
being more lofty in nature, while the Dravidian temples are more intricately carved out, and it can expand the beyond the Garbhagriha region. I mean, it can have very large campus, which is
Oh,
generally
okay.
surrounded by four walls, which
Uh,
generally I don't tend to see this in North Indian temples.
hmm. So you were also saying that temples are having like an energy to them, and I coincidentally saw a post today where they were saying that a certain type of stone has been used for a deity, what is giving a certain kind of energy, a vibration. You as an architect, do you say yes to this, or do you have like a different opinion on this? That a stone is not only a stone can have a message, or a stone can have a vibration to it.
Uh, so I think this knowledge is completely missing in the current day architecture field. The modern architects really do not get into as much dynamics as probably the ancient architects who were designing temples got into. There is a lack of understanding about the very nature of materials in the modern architectural world. That means to say, currently in the 21st century, architects really design things on the basis of which material is more affordable than actually
Um,
thinking which material is more suitable based on energy and then the culture and so on and so forth.
hmm. What do you think about the new parliament building? Can I ask you that?
Definitely. I mean, I see this as a resurgence of the Indic architecture on a positive note.
Hmm.
While there was a lot of debate, many people thought that maybe it's not wise for us to go for a new building itself. I feel that architecture plays a crucial role into reviving the society and the civilization, given the fact, and there's no offense in this, but to say that the structure which was designed by Edwin Lutyens, who was the British architect who designed the
Hmm.
Parliament building and the Rashtrapati Bhavan, absolutely beautiful in Indo-Saracenic architecture, nevertheless doesn't really keep the Indic elements on its facade and elevation, which
Hmm.
Bimal Patel, who's the architect of the new parliament, has very successfully done.
I think it is resonating with the people of the country because we had when Germany was not united, we were our capital was in Bonn, and then it shifted to Berlin, and then they made the new parliament building there, what is based on old structure mixed with a new structure. And I felt like that was also a resurrection of a little nationality feeling because before it was like two countries, and yes, there was definitely nationalism there as well, like being a little proud of who you are, where you come from, your background, and that you can say, yes, I'm German, yay. And but you, it was definitely a great moment when the wall fell. What was one structure that needed to go, an architectural structure that was there to divide and to conquer people and to hurt them. So when that fell, the emotional outpour that came was very, very strong. And then building up slowly all the bits and pieces, like the Potsdamer Platz that was completely destroyed. Now there is a beautiful art is there, and a shopping
Right.
mall is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have revived everything, and they try to keep a certain style in mind and not make it too modern. I think there
Right.
was, maybe you agree, there was a time in the 70s when everything was becoming very modern and very
Right.
like box style. And I
Right.
think it's a
Right.
nice trend to go back to a different kind of a feeling.
Right. Yeah.
Was it here as well in India that you had a certain era when you felt like, okay, this is getting really ugly?
Um, I think people in India really didn't think this way, even when this process of uglification was going on. I think it's also because Indians tend to be slightly mentally colonized by nature. Uh,
Mm,
it's maybe due to the history. So we have a tendency to get Western validation many a times that whatever architecture style is getting quite popular in the West, if it's being blindly imposed over here or it's being blindly followed or copied over here, people tend to appreciate it without really thinking whether it's really working for us or not. Like, for example, if we go into the cities such as Bangalore, where I'm currently in, or Gurugram, Delhi, or be it the new regions of Hyderabad, we see a lot of high rise glass buildings, which,
mm,
according to me, absolutely doesn't make sense in Indian climate because one is the glass buildings tend to trap a lot of heat, and in this 40-degree, 45-degree temperature, then we turn on AC. It really doesn't make much sense over here. It makes sense in Europe, it makes sense in America because of the climate over here. The climatic conditions generally play a big role in deciding what materials are going to get used and what shape is going to come up. So somewhere India needs to get come forward and take its own unique approach, which we have not still. Though with the construction of the new Parliament building, I see there is a lot of hope for India over here because we are now walking on our own path where we have decided that it's time where we set our own design standards. And
mm.
I believe this is what every civilization, every society, every nation should be doing. Nobody should be following anyone blindly, at least in the field of architecture and design at all.
I find this a little difficult in the sense of you have these beautiful structures, like you have the Victoria station, and
Right.
you have these
Yeah.
old structures in South Bombay. So people are emotionally attached to that as well, and I don't see that going.
Absolutely.
Going
Yeah.
ahead, I think it is not a matter of like getting rid of everything. It's just a matter of whatever you decide to do in the future should be in coordination with that it fits the people and the culture. And you're right. I mean, a glass building, I was always very surprised to see such glass buildings. Even Dubai is having it. And I'm thinking even Dubai is going the wrong way with that because it is trapping heat. Like you said, it's trapping heat, it's rising, it's making the electricity consumption going up, the ACs are running like
Right.
mad. It's a little questionable why these countries are doing it. Hot countries are using glass, and then it's dusty, and then constantly somebody has to clean it from morning until night. It doesn't make sense. What would be an alternative? Because I think in a space constrained places like big cities, Bangalore, Mumbai, whatever, you need high-rise buildings. But what would you have you thought about? I don't know what your specific field is where you are into, what you like to do, what you are designing. But do you think there is like a good trend we could look at where somebody has come up with a good concept for India?
So basically, we are seeing a positive change within the architectural community where people are responding to the climate change over here. I mean, in general, overall. And we are now experimenting with different materials, sometimes even going back to exploring the old materials, such as the clay bricks itself. So that's a very good news over here. Uh, One more thing which I really see is that high-rise building is definitely something which we really can't ignore. We do need some of them, at least for office buildings, or we need this in commercial sector, if not in the residential sector still. So there are alternatives which we can come forward with. It's not necessary that we really have glass facades while we go for high rise. Like for example, we can as well go for brick walls, as simple as that. It's just that we need to break those stereotypes which has been said that the modern and tall buildings should probably have glass. Yeah,
I
that's it.
think it's
Yeah.
the same system what is happening with fashion, that people are currently rediscovering hand block printing saris. And, they're going back to roots and they're rediscovering it and they're discovering beautiful things. And I think it will be a plus point for the whole world to go that way. What do you think about these kinds of things where you have plants growing on the outside? Would that be cooling down? I've seen some experiments where there was like one wall is like fully of with creepers, that kind of a thing. Is that something that would work in India, or
It's
not? Maybe not
absolutely a
all the way.
creative. It's a creative measure, and generally the green architects, the ones who work in the field of sustainability, we also call them as sustainable architects. And a lot of these courses are actually emerging in United Kingdom currently, interestingly, where people are actually working with certain plugins within Revit and are doing modeling on the in the software with certain other programs where we really do the energy calculation before executing any project. So the green facades is a very creative initiative. Though I actually came across one of the traditionalist architects who had a very different approach to this, and I also found there was a certain point in what he was saying. So basically, what he says is that instead of going with all these green facades and solar panels and so on and so forth, which we have in every country based on what the local laws are related to sustainability, it's better if we only focus on the strength of the building and the durability of the building. If the building is durable enough, which can, let's say, last for 500, 600 years, like Taj
Mm.
Mahal, it itself is very green in nature because we are not constantly constructing and reconstructing and demolishing the building and constructing again, because it's the process of construction which harms the nature more than the building itself many a times. And in the modern world, I think the idea is that we design buildings and apartments which might just last for 50 years, and then we replace
Not
it with
even.
another building.
Not even. Not even. I feel like Akhil just said
Yeah,
that yesterday. He feels like they're building throwaway flats, throwaway buildings, like use once and then throw away because
right. Yeah,
they don't have any yeah, durability. They're trying to cut
right.
corners, they're building it in a cheaper way and still wanting a lot of money for it. And then you're asking yourself, there's no correlation. And it is so important where you live, how you live, how the space is around you, and the missing greenery. Even though there is a lot, but still there is missing greenery between buildings. There is no, I don't know if that is just something that is being flouted, or are there norms that there has to be a certain distance between buildings? Like
Yeah.
there is this norm in Germany, there has to be a certain distance between buildings, and I see that here
Right.
constantly being broken, if you ask me.
True. Yeah. So that's basically called the setback, which every city tends to have. So every city basically has bylaws. It's basically a book of laws according to which an architect is supposed to design a building. And as you
Hmm.
rightly said, that it's constantly broken many a times. And we see this quite a lot in Delhi, if not in other cities of India. It's probably also because of shortage of space, because that plays a
Yeah,
huge role. And this industry or this field has been taken over by the industrialists than the people who are actually more invested into creativity and creating some harmony in the nature. And the industrialists, the real estate people, tend to think very differently. I mean, I'm not over here for a blame game over here, but uh, they have a very different perspective and approach to things.
yeah, they have like the
Right.
line, the
Right.
bottom line, the money
Right.
making line.
Yeah.
I have had long back, and again, I had talked to my husband about this great system about having an angan and a certain cooling system, because you have this kind of like you have an entry and you have like the okay, you must be
Right.
knowing more about it than I do. Do you
Yeah.
see a
So,
resurrection of that? Do you think we can go back to that? I mean, not in cities, but
right.
if somebody is building a house outside, I see they're just pulling up a two-story building, and it's just looking like this box, and I don't know, is there also like is this also constrained again, or is this not knowing about the possibilities how you can build a building?
So the concept of Angan is very evolved concept in reality than actually what people in general think in mainstream, that it's a very backward sort of a thing, and people were quite primitive in nature and then really didn't know how to make compact buildings. That's not the real case, at least in India. What the vernacular designers had an understanding 600, 700 years ago, which people lack today, is that uh, we have heat waves problem, especially in the northern India. So it's the angans, it's the courtyards, central courtyards, which actually counter this problem very effectively. Generally, the wind and light and the air which tends to come from outside of the building affects the very thermodynamics of your building itself, indirectly and even directly. While angan plays a role, as you were rightly saying, it really cools down the wind, and then you get passive cooling. So basically, this technique is called passive cooling in
Uh-huh.
technical terms in our field. So passive cooling is something which is considered to be much more healthier for humans than the active cooling. Active cooling example can be installing an air conditioner. So air conditioner
Mm.
doesn't give us fresh air, while passive cooling is much better option, like going with an angan. It's obviously not possible in the city regions where now we are going with apartments, obviously. But then we generally see that in the outskirts of the cities, we have villas. And people tend to waste a lot of space right in the front for, creating some small lawn or something, and sometimes even for a backyard. Now, while a backyard and a front lawn might make sense, let's say in Michigan or Pennsylvania, states of United States of America, because those are inherently cooler places. So it's better for them to have compact buildings. Over
Yeah,
here, what makes more sense for us is to cut down the backyard, to
and
remove
stretch
the
it.
front lawn.
Uh,
Yeah, and just spread, just open up the building. I mean, just
mm.
insert a central courtyard. That works much better for us.
I've seen a project, I think it was in Rajasthan, a school for boys and
Yeah,
girls, and they have this new
yeah,
system with a. Did I see that on your Instagram? So,
yes,
um, this
yeah.
wonderful. How many degrees it was
Ratnagiri
going on the
School.
temperature inside?
Yeah,
Huh?
it's the Ratnagiri Girls School.
Ah,
Yeah,
that was beautiful as well. I find these buildings, these older buildings or these new buildings coming up in a different design. I find them very appealing. I find them very pleasant
right.
on the eye and very beautiful. Yeah, because they are just melting into the landscape, so to say.
Correct.
I mean, we have spoken about so many different topics, but what is your specialty? I mean, you are very knowledgeable about different things, but what is the one thing that you are working on? What is your pet peeve, your profession, like your one thing that you concentrate on?
So right now, as an architectural designer, I had been working on a school project, which was a school for differently able students, right in the
Mm-hmm.
outskirts of Bangalore.
Okay.
This project, in fact, got extended for almost 8 months. It just recently got over. And because generally the commercial buildings or the educational campuses are very long projects where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ideation goes into, and then even when you end up doing the planning and conceptualizing the design of the building, you have a lot of other roles to play, like for example checking the site and going to see how your plans are being executed on the ground. So basically this school which I worked on had very different features which goes away from the mainstream norms. Like, for example, we had introduced a lot of slopes, and we made sure that the handicapped students don't really feel out of the box, out of the place. And then we had to ensure that the people who have a problem in walking don't have any functionality issues. Like, for example, in any average building, we see people have problems. uh, I mean, people have day to day problems because of simple lack of compassion, which goes into uh, planning a building itself. So that's what we try to take care of recently. So this is one of the projects which I was working on. Secondly, now I have been into a research which has merely started in the field of urban and regional planning, which is inclining towards smart cities currently. And I am planning on to move a little away from what the mainstream architects do, that is to basically design a building. And then, and instead of that, I want to get into the policy making of how cities should shape up like, given the fact that in India there's a lot of work happening in the field of smart cities. And recently I was invited into a program called FSAI PACC in Cochin, where there were architects and civil engineers and engineers and different industrialists from different parts of the field. And we all met over there, and then we really discussed about the need for uh, coming up with our own original approach towards designing a city itself. Like for example, in India, if you might have noticed, either we have the cities which were designed in medieval period by the kings, and then it just got extended in a very chaotic way by the government of India, which wasn't really planned. Uh, or there were certain cities which were designed by the British, and again then it got expanded in a very chaotic way by under the state rule. And there's a lot of political debate within this, where people bring theories. Maybe it's the fault with the democracy itself, where you really cannot have order in designing a city at all. But that's not really true. I mean, we see a lot of developmental work has gone into a lot of democratic nations, and we have also seen then there has been uh, a tremendous and phenomenal work in nations such as UAE and Saudi Arabia, which tend to not be democratic at all. So I feel it's the society which finally needs to choose how they want their cities to shape up like. And somewhere now we need to pick up those tools and start working on it. It will be an experimenting phase, but we have worked in certain projects. Like for example, there's Navi Mumbai, which has come up quite beautifully now.
Very
And
different, very different, yeah.
absolutely. And
Navi
well,
Mumbai is
we are
looking
just
very
counting.
different, and as long as they can keep that, I even feel Thane is more organized than other parts of the Mumbai region. I don't know. Every time I drive to Thane, into Thane, I feel it is more organized.
Absolutely,
But
ma'am. Yep.
it is
So
definitely such a big field, and I'm very hopeful that in the future, because this is a very young country, the average age is what at the moment 24, 25.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
feel like that the new generation, the more they are exploring, the more they're learning, the more they're looking around, and they're orientating themselves inside India, not only outside. Not having only that Western education system, but having that Indian education system, what they're trying to implement more and more, that they are able to change that. That you said that that people are proactive, because right now most of the people are just like, I have my job and I have my money, and I just want to buy a flat and I don't care what the flat looks like. Kind of a,
Right.
it's like I just want to have a nest. I just want to live
Right.
somewhere. Yeah, and
Right.
I need to
Right.
be, it has to be affordable. So there's a big aspiration in India to own property in comparison to West. Yeah, and my parents have not owned property. They are the ones who had rent all their lives, and because there was rent control and it was not going through the roof, and it was also, they had to live in certain areas, shift. Dad's customs officer, now retired, so we were never in the same place for a long time. We had to shift around a lot, so they were never into buying property. And when I came to India, here it is that yes, I need to buy property, at least not for myself, but at least for my next generation. It's a big thing.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Very different to West.
Right.
I mean,
So
Germany.
I think it's also the sort of customs which we have in Indian families, and even in Chinese society, we see. Like, for example, a very interesting case study which I was reading about China was the young boys tend to get gifted a flat, an apartment by their parents, so they get married to a girl. So no girl marries a man in China until and unless that person has his own apartment. It shouldn't be an apartment of his parents, but it should be his own apartment. So again, those were the family systems in China. Probably a bit of the history had to play a role in it, because generally the countries which has gone through colonialism, or maybe at times certain economical and financial conditions where we weren't very strong at a certain point, so families tend to get a bit more defensive and they want to ensure that their children's future is at least safe, which
Yeah,
might not have been much of a problem, at least in the West, which has been in China and India. In fact, China played a very dangerous game. They ended up coming up with such rapid construction in the
oh
field of
yeah.
real estate that it finally got crashed. And we all know, we are seeing the results of this.
Yeah, I've read something about it. Maybe my audience doesn't know about it. Can you elaborate a little bit more? What happened there? I think 2 years ago everything started crashing. No? It was an after effect of COVID, no, as well.
Right. So basically, in very simple words, a lot of apartments were built, condominiums. Basically, that's the technical word we use for these high-rise societies, and it was obviously owned by these big real estate companies, like how we have DLF and Monthly in India. They have their own set of companies, and basically, it results with uh, the pack. I mean, the chain supply, the supplies chain, which provides you cement. That industry
Hmm.
got affected due to the COVID, and then it had that domino effect, the chain reaction to it. Finally, the construction got halted, and CCP, the government in China, came up with a very different policy, which was where they were trying to tax more. They were trying to tax these real estate companies more, basically, and this again uh, got the entire dynamics changed. So one of their leading real estate company got refused a loan, and since then a lot of their projects came to a halt. And because of that one company, because basically when a company becomes too big, it is too big to even fail after a certain point, because when it goes down, it takes the entire nation down. Like, for example, let's say if Pepsi and Coca-Cola has to go down tomorrow, it's going to
Yeah,
affect the American economy hugely.
I think something similar happened a little bit with Lufthansa, the airline, the German airline, because the government keeps on pushing money in and pumping them with money at some point. Because if Lufthansa falters or fails, then it is having this domino effect on I don't know how many other industries.
Mhm.
Yeah, so China had this big problem, and a lot of people
Right.
lost money, lost flats, lost their, whatever they were dreaming of.
Absolutely, ma'am. But more than that, it's the company which has gone down the drain, and it has taken the entire GDP of the nation down with it.
Oh, wow. That's a big thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And they haven't recovered from that yet.
Uh, it might take almost 10 years minimum to recover.
That's
And
that's that's a lot.
I mean, I think it's the policies somewhere. I'm not going to get into the policy aspect because I'm not an expert in this yet, even though
Mm,
I'm getting into this field slowly. But it's the policies which disregard what possibilities and what effects and results can be due to this eventually.
mm, mm. Completely different question. What made you become an architect? Was this like a childhood dream? You were just wanting it from a very young age, or is there somebody in your family who is in the field?
No, so I basically come from a very strict family which considers that if you're an engineer, then you're everything. If you're not, then well, you've got to think something else. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
one
no
of
scope at
these
all.
doctor, engineer, and what is the third one? Be a doctor, be an engineer, or at least be a standard chartered accountant.
Absolutely. Or get into a government job.
Oh yeah, ये
Yeah,
तो है, ये तो normal है.
right. So, architecture was my childhood dream. Obviously, when I was, I think, in sixth standard, I began drawing maps, and I used to make the plans of the houses. So basically, I used to see my parents looking for a new place to stay, and they used to, go to different apartments and explore all these modular flats. And given the fact that there was a lot of construction happening 10 years ago, and it's happening even today, but
Wait,
this got
wait,
me
wait, which state? One second, which state? I don't think we have told the audience which state you're from.
So I'm currently based in Bangalore,
Yeah,
though my native is from Delhi NCR.
Acha. So your parents were looking in that area.
So yeah, they were looking in that area, and that's when I began noticing how the plans are done generally. And I would often see my parents cribbing about how these neo architects are putting dining room before the living room, given the fact that in Indian households we have the concept of guests a lot. I mean, guests keeps coming and going. So my parents wanted to make sure that living room and dining are completely separate in order to
Hmm.
ensure that there's a certain privacy, while the architecture which entered in India back in 2010s was completely different back in 2005, 6, 10s. And that's when, I mean, architecture started changing in India from 2002 itself, basically. uh,
Okay.
yeah. And with this came the American values into our house designing. Like, for example, in American flats, what we see is you directly enter and then there's a central hall, and that
Mm,
hall itself is zoned out into three spaces. One is the living room, and one is a living region, and one is a dining area, and another one might be a kitchen. And
mm,
the space revolves around this. It was because of the lack of space over there, but now this entered in India also because now even we were short of space eventually.
yeah.
So it made sense for us back in 2004 6 time. And that's when I started observing a lot of these things as a kid. When I was in 10th standard, I remember I ended up picking up a project which was about creating something called as a futuristic sustainable city. And it was a very crazy sort of a project with free flowing ideas. And then we had no concept of bylaws, we had no concept of policies at all. So, uh, uh, we were just freely going around this. And luckily, one of my teacher supported me a lot. And when I was in 11th and 12th, my father had ended up putting me into an IIT JE coaching because he expected me to do engineering, but I wasn't really showing interest over there. All of my notebooks were filled with building drawings and elevations and sections and so on and so forth. And he finally gave up. Actually, my father has been quite supportive also. It was just that he was a bit worried about me joining architecture because the field is not a straight path. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you become an engineer, you have a lot of companies to join. That's not the case in the field of architecture. You basically pave your own path. And in Indian households, anything which deals with paving your own path is generally feared
I
more.
think that
Yeah,
plays into this what we were just discussing about buying a house for security purposes, having a secure career, having a lot. You know, the security seems to be like the topmost important life. Uh, what do you want? Aspiration that you
right,
have your children secure and you have your house secure and everything is secure.
right.
And
Yeah.
then he yielded and you started. You could pursue the career of your dreams.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was obviously given a choice. I mean, I was given a condition. The condition was that if you get into an architectural school which he approves of, then he'll let me go. Otherwise, you've got to go for engineering. Luckily, I ended up getting the school which he was comfortable with, and I went ahead.
Okay, great. That was one question I had. I forgot the other one. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think the rain made me a little bit less alert than I would like to be.
Right.
So after studying, then you went to then it's kind of a freelancing thing where you're getting attached to certain projects. The projects will be there for some time, and then you move on to the next one. Is that how I understand that?
So I basically did my training from Noida. It was
Hmm.
in Vastunidhi Architects firm, where I worked on a couple of the projects such as IIT Bhubaneswar and IIT Palakkad in Kerala. Given the fact that IIT is a very it's a esteemed engineering college. So one of the first projects I worked was on an engineering college itself, interestingly. And then it was followed by AIMS Jodhpur, and then there is Shilp Gram, which is basically inspired by Delhi Heart. Sorry, it's called Shilp Heart, which is inspired by Delhi Heart in Delhi, which is a very famous sort of a market for ethnic wear and traditional jute based
Oh,
arts
okay.
and crafts. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Haven't heard of
yeah,
it, but I'm not surprised because India is so big. I keep on learning new stuff every day.
right. So then I had a short. So I was working in another firm in Bangalore for some time, and then I began doing my own freelancing. And with this, and I got into article writing and research work now, which I am into, and related to urban and regional planning. And I have been also writing for the National Opinion and Organizer, which is the Voice of the Nation. Basically, these are the uh, two online based magazines where people write the political commentaries and
Oh,
other sort of
okay.
columns which get published on that. Yeah.
Mm. Um, what do you think about this whole I keep on hearing like bad stories about the outside of Delhi, that Gurugram and the whole New Delhi area, that the way they were building there was so haphazardous, haphazardous, and they did it so fast that every year when it rains, it gets all flooded, or people don't have water, or if there's always some hangama or the other happening. Do you ever think this can be solved? In itself? Is there any architectural solution for this? Or it has been so screwed up you can't unravel it anymore?
I think it has been screwed up because drainage is one of the important layers of urban design which went completely missing from the city of Gurugram, basically. Uh, and once when you do not really have a concrete plan about how the drainage and sanitation of the city is going to shape up life, it becomes very hard for the future developers to really work on, because now coming up with this entire drainage layer in the context of urban design might end up breaking a lot of road, kilometers of long roads will be broken for digging out and so on and so forth. So it is a big hectic work, though this is not something which is completely impossible, because the problem of drainage and sanitation was also quite big in Bangalore at least five,
Mm.
6 years ago. But then the government went ahead with this. It was quite late, so a lot of people who built their houses on permissible areas had to vacate, and their houses were demolished,
Oh,
which
wow.
they got compensated for. But it's still very chaotic, and it ends up costing even the government a lot eventually when uh, uh, this layer goes missing
हाँ, उल्टा
completely.
बनाया है ना, वैसे भी उल्टा बनाया. Instead of working from the ground up, doing it
Yeah,
in a precise way that it has to be. It is this. Just put it there, and we will figure out everything else later.
yeah,
Like, I don't know a lot, but my uncle was an engineer and he was into city planning. He was the guy you had to go to get permissions if you wanted to dig up a road for certain work, or if you had to. He was the one who had to decide what, where, which roads to shut, how to divert traffic, what kind of things need to be happening. So he was into that whole city planning, and that was for the city Bremerhaven. So it was very interesting to drive with him through the city because he was giving the running commentary. That city, that street we can't go in because there's that going on. And he also
yeah.
had the special permission, so he was taking us into the whole harbor area. So we saw these big containers coming and everything. But he was from the engineering background. Maybe he would have wanted to be an architect, but the same kind of story, just because my
Right.
grandmother was a little bit more stubborn, she pushed him into becoming an engineer. But he was
Right.
very good in drawing, so that's why I said if he would still be alive, I could ask him, would you have wanted to be an architect? He's not there anymore, unfortunately.
Okay.
Coming to your Instagram, that's how I discovered you. Your Instagram is some architecture and some very different stuff. Where when I'm reading it, I'm getting a little dizzy because it is not. I'm missing the foundation. I think I don't have a drainage system yet. I don't know how to understand what you're writing in some of your posts. But what made
So,
you make an Instagram on top of it? I think you're very busy already. You have your freelancing and your writing and you're doing this and that. And then on the side of it, you have this Instagram handle with the name of the enigmatic.
yeah,
Uh,
the perspective enigma.
the perspective enigma.
So,
So what?
so it's something which I'm quite passionate about. So, uh, how much ever the schedule might be tight, it really doesn't matter to me, because I tend to find time for this, for interacting with the people and talking with the people. It energizes me. It sort of charges me, because I think I'm quite curious by nature, given the fact that I am quite passionate about architecture, but uh, I also am quite curious about what the cosmos is, what the universe is, and how the history of the civilization has been. And these ideas, which feeds me, is the reason why I design in a certain way. And I feel that as an architect, I tend to have a much better understanding and perspective of history and civilization than I might have if I wasn't an architect. Because as an architect, many times we are trained to look into subtler details, because we'll be working on those boring AutoCAD drawings with tiny, minute differences in the lines, and we'll be even making sure if a point is meeting a line or not. And it's sort of like a paranoid field. And uh, in this, I have learned how to sharply observe the intricacies which many times we miss. So I think the perspective enigma is something which goes around, in and around the civilizational consciousness in general.
Oh, okay. So anybody who's interested in it, you can. I will link all his information below. You can find him on Instagram, and so whatever information is there about Anish, I will link there. Anything else you want to add? Otherwise, I think this rounded this chat up very nicely.
Right. So, so yeah, as you were saying that there were certain posts which I was posting. So recently, I have been working on a lineage of Chandravansh, which is basically a lunar dynasty. Uh, in India, there are two very popular uh, epics which everybody reads or watches, which is Mahabharata and Ramayana. Now, Mahabharata is one of them which I'm quite fascinated by because I've learned loads from this. In fact, my interest in Indic civilization and culture emerged only after I started reading Mahabharata. Before that, I wasn't really interested into exploring my own history and roots. And eventually, when I got into the very root of Mahabharata, I felt that there was also a need for me to dig up more about the ancestry of Pandavas and the Kauravas, which we tend to watch on TV shows and serials or we read about, and that that's what the series of Chandravansh has been all about, which I'm quite posting nowadays.
Very interesting, super interesting. So anybody who wants to check that out, as I said, I will link it below. And thanks for watching. Thanks, Anish, for giving your time and expertise. Maybe one day when we come up with some topic, I can invite you back on the channel. This was super interesting. Thank you so much for giving the time. Anybody who watched it, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to leave a comment because, hey, we want to trick the algorithm in spreading this video so more people can see this. Thanks for watching. Namaste.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Namaste. Goodbye.